News Channel. It's Wednesday, November the 8th. 1 year ago today, November the 8th, 2016, Donald Trump stunned the world and many in the United States, perhaps even Donald Trump himself, by winning the White House. He promised to shake things up, and he has certainly done that. What has he achieved, and what is yet to come? It's sometimes hard to keep up with the never-ending drumbeat of headlines, the political drama, the intrigue, some would say a reality television show that meets political reality. And we also want to show you this here. Check out this map, because today, on this anniversary, the Democrats are happy about two wins that happened on Tuesday night. The party locked up major races for the governor of both New Jersey and Virginia. And the vote is being seen, in part, as a rebuke of Donald Trump and his politics, and perhaps even the Republican Party. Let's bring in our panelists here. We've got Corey Crowley, Republican strategist. We've got Steve Farnsworth, political analyst. And we've got political commentator Steffen Schmidt joining us as well. They are in Washington, in Virginia, and in Iowa. I've got my states correct today. All right, let's go to Corey Crowley and start off with you, Corey. What has Donald Trump accomplished?
Well, as far as these elections go last night, I think that it's true it's a rebuke, but I would put it in this perspective, Todd. Donald Trump didn't win the state of Virginia. Hillary Clinton did. Now, Ed Gillespie did get fewer votes than Donald Trump, but the president's tweet last night that had he just embraced me and everything I stand for, he would have won, is ridiculous because they only got 1 percentage point different from one another. I think more importantly, you got to look down ballot at these state house races that flipped all over Virginia. The largest gain for Democrats in the state house at one time since 1899. That's 128 years, or 118 years. So those are the big races that matter, and those are the ones that affect the direction of the state for a long time as they look at redistricting going forward and a lot of policies that the state legislature will make.
Steffen, what do you make of this? And was this, I mean, we know Chris Christie, longtime governor of New Jersey, was not popular, and we know, as Corey was saying, in Virginia, they had a Democratic governor as well. Trump lost the state last year, so we don't want to make too much of this. What's your read?
Well, I think it's a great moral injection into a very depressed Democratic Party that's in the middle of its own civil war. Donna Brazil's book and the fight between the Clintons and, the rest of the party. And so, in that sense, it's a huge victory because it lifts the morale of the Democrats. It certainly is a big victory. There were a lot of seats flipped, 2 of them in Georgia. There were all kinds of people elected who represent a much more diverse America. In many places, this was a great race. On the other hand, let's see what happens when we have races in the 4th District in Iowa or in Nebraska or Missouri or Kansas. That'll be the real test.
What about you, Steve? Your take on all this?
Well, I do think that the Democrats have a strategy here that can be employed in other places. Above all, it seems to me the 2017 election in Virginia was an opportunity for a lot of women candidates to get engaged. One of the real powerful Trump effects we've seen in Virginia over the last year has been a much more engaged electorate, not only in terms of voting, but also in terms of individuals willing to run for office. And many of the flipped seats in the House of Delegates were white males being replaced by women, often minority women, in some of the suburban counties in Virginia. So what you do see as a result of this is a playbook for purple state politics, where the Trump message is unpopular, particularly in suburban areas, and that Democratic Party, if it offers up a diverse issue mix and a diverse set of candidates, it can do very well. Northam, it should be remembered, the candidate for governor of Virginia, elected last night, ran about 3 points ahead of Hillary Clinton. So the Trump versus Clinton campaign was much closer than the Gillespie versus Northam campaign last night.
All right, let's zoom out if we can as well and talk for a moment about Donald Trump, bigger picture, Corey. And let me go back to you because I want to get your read on where he stands 1 year since his big victory.
Well, I mean, again, I go back to he's got a conservative justice appointed to the Supreme Court, and beyond that, there isn't a lot to talk about. Fail on the repeal of and replacement of Obamacare. Now the next big test is tax reform, and I think there's at least some nervousness at the White House because the president's calling Senate Democrats from Asia, asking them to get on board, which means that we may have some wishy-washiness in the Republican ranks, and the question of whether we can even get to 50, the same thing that happened to us on health care reform. A report out this morning that Senator Ted Cruz doesn't think this tax bill goes far enough, doesn't like a lot of parts of it, isn't currently going to support it. We can't afford to lose Republicans on big things like this. And it goes back to, Todd, leadership. On big issues like this, if they are not driven by the White House, the force of the bully pulpit and the presidency, you just can't get Congress to act. It doesn't work that way. And this president has yet to figure that out.
Stephen, I remember Donald Trump saying the United States is going to be tired of winning because there's going to be so much winning going on once I become president. Have we seen much winning?
No, we've seen a lot of shaking, a lot of shake, but no bake, as they say. He has disrupted, he has basically complied with the demand of the angry voters that elected him and is shaking things up. But you got to also put something in the oven and come out with a cake or something, and that hasn't happened. I mean, it's been extremely frustrating because both parties are very divided, and the Republican Party is not really on board with Donald Trump, and I guess he actually probably doesn't really connect well with some of the policies of the Republicans. So it's a question of whether he can calm down, maybe bring some Democrats in. We may need a bipartisan consensus on some of these big issues in order to get anything done, because otherwise I think the Republicans just don't have the numbers.
It seems to really have put the Republicans, Steve, into a tricky position, supporting a man who may not even really, as Steffen was saying, be an actual Republican. They're trying to stand by him because he is their president, and yet privately we hear time and again almost all the Republican senators and many in the House of Representatives think he's a terrible president. They won't say it publicly, but that is what they actually believe in their heart of hearts and what they say privately. So, how do you kind of circle that square? What do you think?
Well, of course, Todd, it is important to remember that some Republican senators do actually go public and say that he's not fit to be president in one way or another. Now, they're generally not running for re-election, but they're saying publicly, as you suggest, what a lot of Republican senators are saying privately. And that's a significant problem. As one of your other panelists mentioned a moment ago, you really need presidential leadership to get much of anything through Congress. And Donald Trump, so far, has not shown the kind of respect to senators that they need in order to listen to him and take seriously his agenda. They also, the Republican senators, in addition to needing a bit more air cover from the president, they also need a bit more consistency. If you think back to the health care bill, when Trump said that he had a victory party of a sort after the House passed an Obamacare repeal, and then a few weeks later, he called it mean. And then he moves through these processes very quickly. And so if you're a Republican senator, you might very well worry you're going to be left out on a limb when President Trump decides to change his mind in the middle of negotiations. And so when you're looking at all those sorts of things, you can understand why a growing number of Republican senators are thinking they're going to look out for number one. They're going to look out for their own electoral prospects, particularly in the wake of the very bad news for the party out of Virginia, and therefore may not be doing much of what Trump wants. I think that we've seen a lot of gridlock in year one, and I think we'll see a lot of gridlock in year two.
Corey, do you get a sense that Donald Trump is perhaps growing into the role of president? He's been in there for almost 10 months now, inaugurated at the end of January. Any sort of evolution going on?
I don't see one, Todd, and I don't think most of the American public sees one either. I think he's doing what he's always done in business, which is just try to use the brute force of his personality and of his style to get things done. And he's finding that, in Washington, Congress doesn't work for the president. They're a separate, duly elected branch of government with constituents and beliefs of their own. And this isn't like a family business where you can just tell your kid, get on board or I'll take away your inheritance or your chunk of the company. Or you can say to some company you contract with, I'll cut out your contract and not pay you for the work you did. This is Congress. You either have to get along with them or they're going to just sit and wait you out, because most of the people in Congress were here long before Donald Trump was elected, and most of them will remain here long after he's gone.
I think of this narrative, Stefan, that Donald Trump basically was saying, I'm going to go to Washington and they're not going to change me, I'm going to change them. Is that what he's done?
Well, the problem is that the swamp is actually in control, right? I mean, the Congress, the House, the Senate, the bureaucracy, the lobbyists, K Street, that's the swamp. And if you attack the swamp and you want to drain it, you'd better be able to replace it with something, and he hasn't been able to do that. I mean, President Obama had pretty bad relations, even with his own party in Congress as well. And we have to remember that, Barack Obama lost 1,000 seats. He was not a good leader for the party as a whole. And so when we compare Obama and Donald Trump, we see two candidates who may not be doing much for the party.
Well, last word goes to you, Steve, on this. Have you seen anything in Donald Trump's behavior over the past year that indicates to you that he is becoming more of the commander-in-chief?
You don't really see it when you're talking about any issue relating to policy. You really see a president who is all over the map. You think about what he says one week on trade and what he says the next week on trade. The same goes for health care. The one area I would say where Donald Trump comes off as relatively presidential and perhaps relatively effective is in the area of sort of the one-on-one interrelationships with foreign leaders. As you know, his interactions with the Prime Minister of Canada have been very effective and very open. The foreign trip that he's on now, again, he is sticking to script a bit more than he sometimes does when he talks to domestic audiences. And some of the more harsh and perhaps reckless rhetoric with respect to North Korea is toned down in a way that may win him a bit more support in the international community. So I do think that when you look for some measure that Donald Trump is capable of being president or is learning more on the job, I think those interactions with foreign leaders is the one place where you can say, okay, well, maybe this is working out better than some of the other areas.
Hard to believe it's been a year, gentlemen. Thank you so much for this. All the best.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Don.